Hey everyone, and welcome to the Marvel Snap Decks of the Week, a weekly series that helps you navigate the ongoing meta in Marvel Snap. This week we've got 6 decks for you, 4 in Pool 3 and above, 1 that's Pool 3 exclusive, and then 1 that is Pool 2 exclusive as well. So in this video, there's going to be something for everyone. If you like to support the series, I'd appreciate it if you hit the like button. It makes a tremendous difference for the YouTube algorithm. Now, one thing worth noting here is that we've recently had a nerf to both Silver Surfer and Zabu. There's a ton of experimenting happening in the meta right now, so please use these deck lists as a launching points for your own personal experimentation. These deck lists are very kind of like fluids, one might say, because they're constantly being refined, and the meta is in complete shambles right now, which is a great thing. That's exactly what we want to see in Marvel Snap. When the meta's fresh and the meta's new, there's a lot of different archetypes that can actually find success, and we're still ironing out what the best decks are, so to speak. So definitely take these lists as a starting point to help you launch into the ranks of Marvel Snap. This edition of the Decks of the Week is sponsored by Brilliant.org. As anyone in the world of technology would know, if you're not actively improving on and building new skill sets, you're actually falling behind. Brilliant is the best way to learn math and computer science interactively. It has thousands of lessons from foundational and advanced mathematics to AI, data science, and neural networks. With new lessons being added monthly, there's always something to come back to learn more with Brilliant. While exploring Brilliant's extensive offerings, I personally found myself impressed with the manner in which they organize their lessons, allowing me to get started quickly in the fields I was most interested in. The lessons were well organized and logically planned, allowing you to maximize your opportunity to learn in a new field. I was specifically impressed with its computer science offerings and how it taught computer logic at a fundamental level. To try everything Brilliant has to offer, for free for a full 30 days, go to brilliant.org/Alexander Coccia, where the first 200 people will receive 20% off Brilliant's annual premium subscription service. Starting in Tier 1 this week, Shuri is definitely taking a stranglehold on the current meta. You're seeing Shuri almost everywhere, and it's because it's a very good list. Now, the one thing I will say is that there are a variety of different substitutions available for this particular list, one of which is going to be Ebony Maw in for Iceman. Now, Ebony Maw is great, but for Iceman, you can take Iceman out. Ebony Maw benefits from 0, and obviously is a 1/7 power. You can also access that lane with the Arnim Zola combination with pretty much anybody, and you also have Vision that can access that lane as well. So the inability to play in a lane with the Ebony Maw isn't actually that much of a disadvantage. You also have the opportunity to actually substitute someone like Maximus and Arrow, and what you can do if you don't have Maximus or Arrow, you can then sub in Zabu and Wong. There's actually a variation of this list that's using Zabu and Wong as well, but for this particular list, which is again a good starting point, it's basically doing what a Shuri list wants to do. You have 0 as well. You can also include someone like Typhoid Mary if you wish, but the realistic truth is that with 0 has so many targets here, right? You have 0, you have Lizard, you have 0, you have Maximus. And then, of course, you want to be playing Shuri on turn 4. If you do not have Shuri, you can be playing, obviously, you can have either Sunspot Armor or one of your lower costs. It's one of the advantages of having many lower cost cards in this particular deck list. And then from there, if you drop your Shuri on turn 4, you have the opportunity to like Shuri Arrow or Vision, which is an amazing card because you can move it very effectively. You can even move Vision into a location to drop Arnim Zola on it afterwards. Naturally, the most common is to actually drop it on Red Skull. Now, Red Skull becomes a 30 with the Shuri effect. If you're able to 0 Red Skull prior, you get rid of the +2 power benefit for the opposing players, and then obviously you can either Taskmaster that 30 Red Skull, or you can Arnim Zola that 30 Red Skull. Regardless, you have a lot of options, and this deck is known for putting out a tremendous amount of power relatively quickly. The next Tier 1 deck that we need to talk about this week is Zabu Negative. Now, with the change to Zabu going from a 3-cost 2 to a 2-cost 2, that only reduces 4-cost cards by 1, people have quickly realized that, well, that is amazing for Mr. Negative, because the major thing about Mr. Negative is you want to get Mr. Negative out as quickly as possible, because each individual negative draw is immensely powerful for the card itself. So if you have Zabu, it is effectively a second Psylocke. We used to use Psylocke as the lone kind of cheat for Mr. Negative. You get Psylocke out on 2, Mr. Negative comes out on turn 3 because of the 1 additional energy. Well, Zabu effectively does the same thing. So the consistency of Mr. Negative decks have actually gone up significantly. With Zabu as well, you can run a few extra cards, and you can run the Jubilee, Shuri, and Wong as an immense kind of output of power combination, especially when Zabu's on the board. And then naturally you have some major fantastic Mr. Negative cards in things like Iron Man Mystique, which is one of the god tier combinations of Mr. Negative. And then of course you have Taskmaster, which in particular for this list works extremely well with Black Panther, because what you can do is with even an inverted Black Panther at a 4/5 does naturally provide itself 10 power, but you do have the Shuri Wong combination to make absolutely massive Panthers, and then what you do is you Arnim Zola it, which is often drawn for free, or you have the Taskmaster, which can again be drawn for free or played for free. So you're able to do like a major combination with either Zola or Taskmaster with the Black Panther. Now the tricky thing about this deck list, and again I told you before that these are all launching points, is that like once you start doing some substitutions, the deck list becomes a little tricky, because this particular deck list really revolves around Shuri Wong and Black Panther. That is kind of like the package, the cluster of cards that really activate this particular deck list. If you're missing one or two of those cards, then the identity of the deck list kind of falls apart. So while I'm suggesting like if you don't have say just Wong, you could maybe substitute Rogue for all the Morbius which we're seeing right now. You could also, like if you don't have Shuri, you can try like a really standardized Mr. Negative card like Ironheart, especially if you have Wong, because Ironheart Wong's insane. But if you don't have Black Panther, like, okay, you can use someone like White Tiger, for instance. Again, another amazing Mr. Negative card, but like, then you're starting to reach and you're starting to kind of dismantle the particular identity of this list. So time will tell how we can continue to substitute and adjust these particular deck lists for different kind of archetypes within Zabu Negative. But right now, this is kind of the one that most people are turning to. Alright, so now we're in tier 2 of the decks of the week, and we're starting with Deathwave. With the changes to Zabu and to Silver Surfer, Deathwave has come back into the meta. I actually should correct myself. It wasn't necessarily Zabu and Silver Surfer, it was actually the leader nerf that kind of brought back Deathwave, because now with leader getting completely dismantled, the turn 6 play of basically playing Arrow, She-Hulk, and Death all together is now back and stronger than ever, because the leader, which is one of the key counterplays, now just doesn't exist. Now, for those that are kind of new to this list, and I'll provide a couple examples down below of how you can substitute, particularly Arrow. You might be thinking, Alex, I don't have She-Hulk though. Why can't I substitute She-Hulk? Because She-Hulk's kind of like almost mandatory in this list, because without She-Hulk, you really miss out on the key power play, which is basically on turn 5, you wave. You conserve 2 energy. That means you saved 2 energy, which reduces the cost of She-Hulk by 2. You then wave, which sets everything to 4. She-Hulk becomes a 2. Death should be free at this point because of everything you've destroyed. And Arrow costs 4. You have 6 mana on turn 6. So Arrow on 4 mana, 2 for She-Hulk, and a free Death. The result is you get to play 3 very high power cards on turn 6, Arrow disrupting their play while you're putting basically 10 power and 12 power on the board. It's insane, the combination. Now, if you don't have Arrow, you are missing out a little bit, because it really does make the deck list better. You can try someone like Captain Marvel. You can try someone like Spider-Woman. You can even try someone like Gamora, who I think is kind of slept on, because usually you can kind of predict at least one spot where your opponent's going to play, and Gamora sets huge power, right? Like, it's insane the amount of power Gamora puts out, and when you consider Gamora, She-Hulk, Death, like, it's insane how much power. But the disruption of Arrow is certainly the best, but this is really a deck list that honestly isn't all that expensive. Like, honestly, me and everyone else has talked about how good She-Hulk is, so if you had She-Hulk in your token shop, you probably bought her, which was a great choice, and if you have that, then this deck list really does work wonders in the current meta. Coming in at tier 3 is Galactus. Now, this is a very fascinating deck list, and this is kind of like a very vanilla starting point. There are many different variations of this particular list with Galactus, because you even have like Daredevil, Hobgoblin style lists as backups, and there's so many different ways, but this is a very vanilla one to get you started. One thing I will say is the Null is a very expensive card, yes indeed, but it really does set the tone for the power of this Galactus base list, because without Null, Galactus as a whole feels a little weaker. You do have other kind of like combinations, like if you don't have Null or Spider-Man, for instance, you can actually get rid of Spider-Man, who's great because you can actually like Galactus and then turn 5 Spider-Man, and they can't play on turn 6, and you have like all the information you need to win the game or retreat, but anyways, more likely win the game. If you don't have that, you can play Shuri. Shuri's great because, like, let's say you don't get Electro or Wave, so you got to play the game normally, like, oh no, I can't Galactus on turn 4, which is really what your major power play is. What you can do is you can Shuri into the Doc Ock. Doc Ock's going to be 20, all their stuff's going to come down, and use Shang-Chi. Maximus works well for that as well because it ensures their hand's full, so it can be very disruptive with the Dr. Octopus play. But generally speaking, right, this deck list is all about kind of like flexibility. Of course, you have the Psylocke to try and cheat out the Galactus early. That's exactly what Wave and Electro do as well. Wave is generally the highest performance play. You Wave on turn 3, Galactus turn 4, Spider-Man turn 5, or Dr. Octopus on turn 5, and then you're literally holding like Chavez, Death, Null, or whatever in your hand and just smiling all the way to the bank. They're likely to retreat, but whatever. This is a tier 3 list. It has some problems. It is very expensive, so that's kind of what holds it down. The consistency of its play, if you don't have Wave with Galactus in your hand, can be a little questionable, but otherwise, it's a very solid list. It is very countered, by the way, by Arrow, so if you ever see Wave on turn 4 and they have a Wolverine on the board, be very wary of Arrow, because Arrow can pull the Galactus, especially if they have initiative, of course, overall to the other side, where you're not going to be able to proc Galactus properly, right, which is pretty much an instant retreat for you. But again, a lot of different win conditions, and overall, a solid deck. For our Pool 3 exclusive deck of this week, Patriot is making a comeback, in particular the Ultron variant. Utilizing Ultron, you're basically able to put all these drones onto the board, and of course, Patriot and Mystique love those drones, because guess what? They have no abilities, +4 to those drones, maybe +1 in addition, as Coccia hits the board as well, and then look at that, it's Blue Marvel too. So those drones become absolutely massive, so Ultron becomes an absolute power play, especially as a 6/8 on of its own. Now, one thing I will say is that people usually see this coming. Also, you're going to be a little short on space. You do have Squirrel Girl. Wasp, of course, doesn't have abilities. Squirrels don't have abilities as well. Misty Knight, Shocker. The one disadvantage to this particular deck list right now is that, like, first of all, people see it coming from a mile away. When you play Misty Knight, they know what's up. The second Misty Knight drops, they're like, okay, I know what you're doing, right? Shocker's the same way. You only play Shocker in one deck, and that is this one here. Now, the one thing that is really notable is that Enchantress is all over the place right now because of Morbius. So there's a lot of discard happening right now, and the result of that is Enchantress is going to be all over the place, a major counter for this deck list. There is some reason to say that you might even want to separate Patriot and Mystique if you play them on curve. However, a lot of people tend to put Patriot and Mystique together so that you can make most of the Ultron play with the drones. But then again, if they're together, Enchantress completely dismantles you. So there is some piloting challenges with this deck list as well. In the interest of keeping it cheap, we also use the Thing, which is actually a pretty decent card in this list, a 4/6, 4/8 for 4/8, 4/10 if you get the Mystique Patriot list down as well, which is great because if you consider someone like Typhoid Mary is a 4/10, the Thing can be a 4/10 with basically no additional downside. Onslaught's great as well, because if you don't end up pulling Patriot and you have a whole bunch of stuff on the board like the Squirrels, the Debris Rocks, which of course have no abilities, you can drop Onslaught on top of your Mystique and Patriot, and of course maybe it's Coccia and Blue Marvel in that lane as well. Well, only 3 of them in addition to the Onslaught. You double the ongoing effect, and of course it's going to be absolutely insane the amount of power you output. So anyways, Patriot, of course, a very solid Pool 3 exclusive deck list. With all the deck lists out there in the meta that revolve around gambling, like you got the Lockjaws, you got the discards, Pool 2 is like, man, I want to gamble too. How do I do that? How do I gamble, Alex? Well, you do it with Jubilee. Now, Jubilee is a great card because obviously it's going to pull a card from your deck into the location. Really high RNG, but you said you wanted to gamble, so here we are. Now, basically what we're doing here is we have a bunch of cards that really benefit us here. What we do is we have the Sunspot Armor combination with conjunction of the Infinite. So we have a win condition right there. So we have the Sunspot Armor Infinite combination right off the bat, staple to Pool 2. We also have a Coccia, which is great because a Coccia is going to give +1 power to everything in the deck, which is great because it makes a Vision 5/8, which is huge. Chavez is guaranteed to be a 6/10. You have a 5/4 Blue Marvel, and all of a sudden, like, these cards really get more powerful. You have the Storm, obviously, for the location correction and the Storm Sunspot location. Generally speaking, you want to play Sunspot, Armor, Storm, and then what you do is you can follow that up with a Jubilee if you want, hopefully, or you can put Nightcrawler in there or whatever, or you can just honestly conserve mana and run up the Sunspot. It's up to you, because then you're going to have the Infinite on turn 6 if you skip the turn on turn 5, which is great, and again, it helps you win that Storm to location. But realistically, it's all about hitting something valuable with Jubilee. The important note here is if you hit Jubilee with something like Nightcrawler, you can move Nightcrawler out of the way and continue to play in that location, which is important. Vision's the same way. Everything else represents a pretty big hit. The only concern would be dropping Enchantress on top of your armor, but that tends to be like not too much of a factor. Hulk's in there simply because Hulk is just a very large target for Jubilee, but Jubilee is required, Chavez is required in Jubilee decks because it's always going to be present and available for you to hit. Regardless, guys, I hope that this video helped you guys this week. Another video for you down below if you want to continue watching some more Marvel Snap content. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I really appreciate your support, and we'll see you in the next Marvel Snap video.